Welcome back to the Oscar Project Podcast, the show where I discuss Oscar-nominated films year by year. I am your host, Jonathan Eaterberg, and today I'm bringing you an interview with Adam Graves, director of the Oscar-nominated short film, Anuja. Before I jump into the interview, please be sure to subscribe to the show in your podcast player so you can get all the newest episodes as soon as they are released. If you like the interview and want to hear more, please consider leaving a rating and review in Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Adam J. Graves is a philosopher turned filmmaker who holds a BA in South Asian Studies and a PhD in the philosophy of religion from the University of Pennsylvania. He is the author of The Phenomenology of Revelation and a professor of philosophy at MSU Denver, where he teaches film and philosophy. Adam wrote, directed, and produced the award-winning short film Cycle Verite in 2021, and produced and edited the documentary short The Other Side of the Sun in 2024. He joins me on the podcast to talk about his short film, Anuja, which is nominated for Best Live-Action Short Film at the 97th Academy Awards. Adam, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Jonathan. Really appreciate it.
So your film tells the story of a young girl named Anuja who works with her sister in a garment factory and is given a rare opportunity to kind of better her situation in life. Where did the idea for this film originally come from?
Well, so I was working on a coming of age story, just kind of generically kind of working on a coming of age story when my wife and I were let me back up a little bit. We were coming out of the pandemic at this time, and this was right as you might remember questions about supply chains were kind of right at the, the focus of media attention. And most of that attention, though, was being focused on the consumer end of the supply chain. Like, why can't I get my goods? Where's my gadget? Where's this? Where's that? And my wife and I have always had a longstanding interest in labor questions, issues surrounding labor, partly having to do with the fact that her family history is kind of wrapped up in a legacy of indentured labor. Her family was brought from Uttar Pradesh, a state in northern India, to Guyana, country in South America, by the British at the beginning of the 1900s to work the sugar plantations. When kind of after the British abolished slavery, they turned to their colonies to find cheap labor, and so they basically, exploited, colonized to kind of take the place of the slaves, and it was kind of considered slavery by another name. And so we've always, as a family, been interested in labor issues. Coming out of the pandemic, reading about supply chains, starting to think about the other end of the supply chain, who are the people producing these products and what's going on there. And in the course of reading, my wife and I came across this incredibly troubling statistic, namely that 1 out of 10 children globally is engaged in child labor. And I mean, that just is, I think,
A little staggering.
I haven't met anyone who's not surprised by that.
Yeah.
1 out of 10 just sounds like a really, really large number. When you say 160 million kids, that sounds like a lot too. But 1 out of 10 somehow really hits the point home. So we were developing a coming of age story. We read the statistic. We thought, how many films do we really know, coming of age films do we know that deal with kids who are engaged in labor rather than like attending school or on summer vacation? We thought, well, this would be a really important story to tell, but also, quite frankly, there's a lot of narrative possibilities here. It was the more we did research on child labor, specifically in the garment industry, the more we realized that the dynamics involved were incredibly complicated and kind of murky from a moral standpoint. And that's kind of the space that I like to work as an artist and as a filmmaker. So the film isn't meant to be just like a public service announcement, a wag your finger at the audience kind of film, but rather it's meant to kind of explore the murkiness and the complexity of that world. And we just thought, at the end of the day, the film is about two sisters and them as individuals, not as victims. It's not really about child labor. It's a coming of age story that happens to feature kids who are 1 out of 10, right? Who are just, those are the kids that this film follows. And turns out it's not that rare, unfortunately.
Yeah. And you mentioned the two sisters. You have two wonderful young ladies who are featured in the film, playing the sisters Anuja and Palak. I hope I'm saying that close.
Palak,
Palak.
yeah.
How difficult was it to find the right young girls to play those characters in a film like this?
Incredibly difficult, but at the same time, that was a really fun moment. And we knew that casting, I know, I think every director knows casting, goes like story and casting. Those are the two most important aspects of any film. And we had the story, but now the question was, how do we cast the film? And it was important to both my wife and I that we at least try to cast the film directly from the community itself. We know that there's just a way in which people comport themselves to the world and carry themselves through the world, that derives from their environment, from their past, from their history. And so we thought it would be really important to try to cast someone to play the role of Anuja who comes from that environment. And so we worked with various nonprofits who are engaged with providing educational opportunities for children who are either working or previously working. And in the course of our research, we came across this organization, the Salaam Trust, which is an incredible NGO or nonprofit based in Delhi that provides food, shelter, educational opportunities to kids who were, from kids in vulnerable situations, whether they be living on the streets or working. And that organization was actually established by the family of Mira Nair, the famous internationally acclaimed director Mira Nair, who made films like Monsoon Wedding and The Notebook and sorry, The Notebook, Namesake book. Here's a category,
Yeah.
they could have made The Notebook. I mean, Mira can make anything.
Right,
She's
right.
incredible, total, absolute unheard of talent, and, but her family established the Salaam Trust after she made the film, Salaam Bombay, which deals with a child, who's living on the streets in Mumbai, then Bombay, and so that organization, that nonprofit, knows the value of the arts and the performing arts, and so they provide their kids not only lessons in reading and writing, but they offer them opportunities to engage in stage performances and in various forms of performing arts that allow those kids to cultivate a sense of self-worth and confidence and find their own voice. So that organization in particular was really happy to basically let the girls at their homes know about the film that we were making, and many of the kids submitted self-tapes. So we were simultaneously watching audition tapes come in from professional actors in Mumbai, as well as tapes coming from kids who are living in these resident homes. And Sajda Patan's tape was it just blew our minds. It was unlike anything else that we had seen, and we knew immediately as soon as we saw it that she was the person. She was Anuja.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, and I also like how, at the end of the film, you have a couple of scenes where you actually, I think, took the film back to some of those, those same kids and showed it to them. What was it like, watching them kind of watch people who represented themselves on the screen in your film?
Well, that's I mean, obviously the most rewarding moment in in the process of filmmaking is, you make a film and you always wonder, directors and filmmakers are always told, keep your audience in mind. Who is this film for? At a certain point in researching the film, we decided that this film had to be for the kids themselves. Like, they were the most important audience, and we wanted to make sure that the film that we made was the kind of movie they would wanna watch, and they would at least get something. Is it gonna be their favorite film? I don't know. I actually think it might be, but it's maybe not the film that they would watch ordinarily, but we wanted to have elements that would appeal to them and that would show them would kind of reflect back on them as the heroes of their own narrative. And so, yeah, so screening it at the Salaam Balak Trust with Sajda, the girl who plays Anuja, and her classmates was just I mean, it was so powerful that we decided that in fact my co-editor Krishan Naik was like, "You know what, Adam? That has to go up during the credit roll of the film." And I was like, "Yeah, that's a brilliant idea," because it kind of brings the film full circle. And there's another piece, and I don't wanna get ahead of myself, but there's another piece to that, and that is the film deals with, an untenable decision, an unimaginable decision that so many girls and young kids around the world are faced with and shouldn't be faced with. It lets the audience rest with that decision and grapple with that decision. And it doesn't always satisfy people's desire for conclusion, resolution, and nice and tidy, whatever. But that clip at the end of the kids watching the film and Sazda herself at a school in a residential center now having an education and having new opportunities is a kind of meta resolution, right? So within the kind of confines of the strict film itself, we might call this a kind of a European film as opposed to a Hollywood ending. There is a kind of supplement, a kind of appendage, an appendix or a meta ending, which is, I think, incredibly hopeful. And so it felt it felt right to just include it there for that purpose.
I definitely like seeing that resolution as a counterpoint to the actual resolution of the film. We've talked a lot about kind of these centers for the kids. Talk about the importance of kind of showing the working conditions and the living conditions that girls like this and boys, I'm assuming too, kind of deal with on a daily basis in their lives.
Yeah, it's a good question. We decided, well, we didn't decide. We knew from the beginning that this film would only be made if we could film on location and in real locations, not recreate anything, not produce, not put together sets. There were sound stages in Delhi that were like, we could reproduce a really nice, it'd be a lot easier to film in our sound stage with a setup that will look like an authentic, shanty kind of, home dwelling within the context of a juggy or a slum. And I'm like, "No," but then everybody's like, "Well, look, here's the thing. When you're shooting in the slums, you're gonna have dogs barking constantly, you're gonna have roosters crowing, you're gonna have so much noise." These are incredibly noisy places because you have thousands of people living in incredibly dense. I mean, these are probably the most some I'm not a sociologist, I'm just speculating here. Probably some of those densely populated parts of the world, like parts of the surface of our planet. Shooting in these environments, oftentimes there's, getting a generator in there to run your lights is very complicated. Just getting in and out of what they call informal settlements is really challenging. And so there's a lot of pressure for us to kind of reproduce these places, but really, no, we're going to live with it. We're going to live
Yeah.
with challenges because we knew that it would come through on the screen. We knew that like an audience knows when you're faking, and so the factory was also a real factory. We visited about a dozen, somewhere, but yeah, probably about a dozen factories just to find the right place. Where we wound up shooting was it was actually a jeans factory, a factory that shoots that creates jeans that kind of like this color. And so it wasn't particularly colorful. So we did fake that much. We had to pull the jeans out and put different kinds of, female apparel in. But while we were doing those site visits, we were also, while we were scouting the locations, we were also that was kind of part of the site visits because we were entering these factories while they were, in operation.
Sure.
And I will say that we did not encounter child labor while we were visiting, in part, I mean, partly because child labor, it's not like it's happening everywhere all at once. Also, I mean, it's widespread, but there are clearly factories that are abiding by the laws. But also, people knew we were coming.
Right.
People knew we were on their way. Film producers shooting a film about child labor. They're not going to
Kids, you
have
get the day off today.
yeah, hot places, difficult places, not, there are different child labor takes different forms, and there are some forms of child labor that are so dark, I don't think either of us even wanna try to imagine them. I've read case studies about kids who've been rescued from underground, facilities where they've been chained for years, literally chained, just doing one remedial task for years and years and years, and that's not something that I can't even think about that, let alone imagine filming, conditions like that. So this factory where we shot, we were envisioning kind of more typical kind of, sweatshop conditions. The kids work really long hours, which are typical, one break, 14-hour days. They're under a lot of pressure. A lot of times the factory owners will make deals with the young girls that they don't get paid, but they're gonna pay for their dowry. There are some really terrible stories, which we don't deal with in the film at all, about young women who are against their knowledge forced to be on the pill so they don't
Mm.
menstruate, work longer hours without having to take bathroom breaks and things. Really terrible tricks and things that are played on these children, young women and children. And so we just felt for us the best we could do is recreate the conditions that we experienced in this one factory. It's hot, it's sweaty, it's tough work, and they work around the clock. And then the rest of the world was just these were spaces we filmed in spaces that these kids would actually go. We filmed all the places we were populated with children, and we had to cut out some of that as footage actually in the edit along the way. But they're places where these kids really would have lived. So I think our characters are just pulled right out of the fabric of that universe, and we were able to, one of the joys of making the film was we were able to go into those spaces and experience you know, and capture as much of the reality as possible on camera.
Yeah, and you know, you talk about filming in those spaces and with the actual people. Obviously, you've done work both in narrative film and in documentary, as I mentioned at the top. Was there anything that you took from your documentary experience that you brought to this in terms of making a narrative film that felt almost in a little bit of a way, kind of like a documentary of some sort?
It's really funny that you say that because everybody at the home calls it the documentary. And they refer to Anuja as the documentary, which is really fun. I don't want to oversell myself as a documentary filmmaker. I shot a documentary. I shot one documentary in the course of an afternoon on an iPhone with my son. We moved to LA and we noticed that we had a lot of neighbors who were living on the streets, and we thought let's try to tell the story of some of our unhoused neighbors. So we just took our iPhone into the streets and we found a really interesting subject and we filmed and tried to tell his story. But I have very little experience as a filmmaker, period, full stop. This was really, by some measure, you know, my second film, maybe my first, if you don't want to count a film that I shot mostly in my living room. But yeah, I have friends, really good friends like Aaron Kopp and Amanda Kopp, who are genius documentarians. They made a film, a feature film called Liana, which kind of is a genre-defying documentary that has animated elements about kids in the country formerly known as Swaziland, where Aaron grew up. And having so many conversations with him and watching his process, certainly I learned a lot about how to film, kind of how to capture like, you know, verite moments. And yeah, I think when you're working with child actors, one of the keys is to try not to have them act. I think that's actually true of even adult actors, right? It's like nobody wants schmacting on screen, you know, and schmacting is like it's okay for certain genres, but when you're doing drama, the less acting, the better. And so I wanted, you know, when we cast the film, we knew if we cast kids who had life experiences that were connected to those. Now, I will say Ananya, the girl who plays the older sister, she's from a totally different socioeconomic class. She goes to a college, an elite college in Bengaluru, formerly Bangalore, and but she has a younger brother, and so her relationship with her younger brother provided a template for her understanding of her relationship with Sazda, her younger sister in the film, and getting them interacting naturally, not acting, not playing out that relationship, but actually feeling that relationship and developing that relationship was really key. Because then it's just like point and shoot, you know? Then as the director, my job is made easy, right? So it really was. There were moments, you know, where we really did try to treat it almost as if we were filming a documentary, you know? Which is another way of saying we were creating an environment to be filmed that was just as real as could be.
Yeah, definitely sounds like it. Now, I have a couple of questions not specifically related to the film, but before I move on to those, is there anything else you want to touch on about Anuja?
You know, no, I mean, we can always circle back, but I think we've covered the gambit. We talked about Sazda and her background and the Salaam Balak Trust. I want to always have an opportunity to plug the Salaam Balak Trust because they do such great work and there's a chapter in Delhi. So if you Googled like SBT Delhi, Salaam Balak Trust Delhi, you'd find them and they can use all the resources. We're hoping to use the film as a vehicle to, you know, it's not the film is it's a work of art. I didn't intend it to be a public service announcement or a wag of the finger to the audience, like, you know, learn about child labor. But of course, we hope that it does change people's hearts and minds and move them to think more critically about the products they consume and also possibly support the organizations that are trying to bring an end to child labor. So I just had to make that plug for the Salam Balik Trust. But beyond that, I think we've covered everything.
Sure, excellent. Well, we'll actually try and put a link to that in the show notes when the episode goes live as well for you.
That would be lovely.
So this might be the hardest question I ask, but if you had to pick your top three films, what would they be?
Well, I mean, they'd obviously be three different films on three different occasions. No question about that. Wow. Let's do The Lady from Shanghai, Orson Welles, classic noir. Can I do four?
Go for it. Yeah, I
I'm
can't
gonna
stop
do
you, so go do it.
I'm gonna do Inarritu. I would do any of Inarritu's films, but I'm gonna go with Birdman, which won an Oscar. So like maybe that's like, you know, too obvious. But all of his movies are incredible. Beautiful is another probably my second favorite film of his, or maybe my first. I don't know. And then I will go with Lawrence of Arabia. Again, like these are that's just too obvious. Oh, why don't we say Gandhi instead? These are films that they don't make anymore, you know? They're epics that my wife and I we like to call these like non-violent action film ethics, epics, you know? Bridge on the River Kwai, like all of the David Lean films, for example. Like they don't make those anymore. Now if we make an epic film, it has to be an action film. It has to have violence. Not that I'm, completely opposed to violence on screen, but it's just they make them for teenagers
Yeah.
rather than adults, you know? Where are the heavy-hitting adult epics, you know? Bring those back, Hollywood, bring them back. Now, I'm not, they're expensive, and so I see I'm not hopeful that
Yeah.
they're coming back, but maybe. Amelia Perez this year is an example of something that kinda has an epic quality but it's still not it's no Lawrence of Arabia in terms of its, scale.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
And I wanted to throw out something else. I mean, maybe something like White Material. But yeah, so I'll go with those.
All right. Fantastic. Some ones that I haven't had recommended in there before, so that's good.
Oh, good, 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 good.
Now, similar question. If you could invite any three movie characters to your next dinner party, who would they be and why?
Well, Lawrence of Arabia, clearly. I mean, I don't get me wrong. I wouldn't want him to stay the whole night. No, movie characters. Oh boy, this is tough but interesting. I just have to think. Let's just like go with like something like Bogart's character in The Maltese Falcon, somebody super cool comes in with his fedora, has a story to tell. And then let's do this is gonna seem weird, but let's go with like Kate Blanchett's character from the recent film where she plays it's the film by I'm having one of those moments where I can't remember anybody's name. I think it was a Todd Field film.
Oh,
She's kinda nasty.
Tar.
Tar, yeah, let's bring Tar. There's something about her that just like that would be I can just see Tar and Lawrence just having this kind of like standoff, two outsized egos with very different personalities, kind of like, battling it out at the dinner table, and then Humphrey comes in and kind of like, so there's something I don't know. This is a weird space, but that's our dinner party for tonight.
That's the whole point of that question. Let's see what we can create crossing some strange universes.
What kind of cocktails will we serve?
Exactly. Now, do you have any books that you could recommend that you've read recently or that you really enjoy? Could be fiction or nonfiction and don't have to be related to movies at all.
Yeah, I really like any of this is like I know that his short stories are often adapted to film, but like any of Murakami's short stories, I love theirs. There's another collection of short stories called like Everything Ravaged, Everything Burned by I think his name is Wells Tower or something. And that was really fun. And then in terms of nonfiction, I read, I'm a professor of philosophy. That's kind of my previous vocation was philosophy. So I tend to read most of what I read is philosophical works. And I often go back to Pierre Bales' Encyclopedia, which is this, classic work from like, the 17th century that rivaled the Bible in popularity. And, at the time it was like, why? But now it's like incredibly obscure, but there are
Yeah.
entries on all kinds of strange things like, ancient Manichaean sects and their crazy beliefs. And I just love it. He's kind of a skeptic, and he has a very kind of fun satirical take on all these kind of classic schools of thought. So that to me, the works like that tend to be a source of inspiration, maybe Diderot, Rousseau, some of these writers who don't write in a kind of highfalutin formal academic language, but tend to write as, more like essayists. So those are often sources of inspiration for my narrative projects.
Excellent. And who else should I have on the podcast from the world of film? Anyone that you want to hear more from that we should try and get on the podcast as a guest?
Oh, I mean, the problem is if I recommend my dear friend Aaron Kopp, who I just mentioned earlier in this episode, then I'm going to he's gonna outshine me. So I mean, he's very eloquent and well spoken about these things, and he'll come in, he'll actually read the questions beforehand. So I'll be outdone. But I also, there are a lot of people. I would say Shitesh Saini, who was one of my great collaborators on Anuja. He's a Delhi-based filmmaker who went to the Prague Film School, along with Akash Rajay, my cinematographer on the film. So those guys are great. I know you only asked for one, but Krishan Naik, my co-editor. So I'm going to throw them all out there, and
Sure.
I'm happy to send invites. But definitely, those four come to mind.
Fantastic. We'll have to work on getting them on the podcast sometime in the future. And lastly, before we wrap things up, do you have any other projects that you're working on currently? And also, where can people follow you on social media to stay updated with your work?
Oh, great. Yeah. So the second question, social media, I'm only really on Instagram. I think I have Facebook and stuff, but I've more or less, I can only handle one social media at a time. Never really been on X. So thank goodness. No, but yeah, so my handles are Anuja the film, Anuja the film. That's where you can follow the film, Anuja. And that's kind of my main place these days. But I'm also at Adam_J_Graves on Instagram. So I have those two accounts. Projects, I have a couple different projects that are, screenplays, in various states of development. And yeah, my hope is to go on and make the feature film. That's the plan. And I have at least two that I'm really hopeful I can get made in the next several years. One is takes Anuja and positions that story within a broader context. A kind of Anuja-like character placed in a broader context of kind of almost international. It's like an international thriller that deals with a girl where this girl from slum known as Salimpur outside of Delhi gets wrapped up in some kind of international thing. It's a bizarre story, but it has to do with the issue of digital waste. So a lot of our electronic devices wind up getting exported and
Right.
abroad, and so you can kind of use your imagination to figure out where that goes. And then I have another story, another film that's more of like a humanist drama, a very small story, but it's shot in Paris, so it has its own challenges. But it's a story about a father-daughter relationship, and it's kind of ironic because I'm a father of two sons, so it's interesting that I keep on kind of gravitating towards these I do have a lot of like ideas about like these kinds of stories, the parent-child relationships, and it's about let's say it's about a father who's estranged from his daughter, and he goes in search for his daughter and tries to reconnect with her. And so he's an American, and he travels to Paris where he learns his daughter's staying. I don't have an elevator pitch yet. I haven't actually taken these out. These are kind of ideas that I've developed, armchair only, like sitting at my computer and not talking to many people about them beyond my family, and some close collaborators. But yeah, but I hope to have them all kind of tip top ready for pitching in a couple weeks or month or so.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much again for the time today. Thanks for sharing your film. We really appreciated sharing it and getting to hear some of the stories that went into making it. And of course, best of luck at the Oscars in March.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Really appreciate your thoughtful questions. Enjoy the show.
Thank you again to my guest today, Adam Graves. His film, Anuja, is nominated for Best Live-Action Short Film at the 97th Academy Awards. The Oscar Project podcast is written and produced by me, Jonathan Eaterberg, with editing assistance from Joshua Eaterberg. If you want more movie coverage, check out the Oscar Project online at theoscarproject.substack.com, and be sure to come back for my next episode, where I will be discussing the 1927 film Sunrise. Until then, I hope to see you at the movies.